A lot of hype and a lot of anticipation for the New England Patriots entering the 2025 season. After they were one of the NFL's worst teams a season ago, Mike Vrabel is now the head coach, and the momentum has shifted. Can the Patriots live up to those high expectations and make the postseason, or will it still be a rocky road ahead? Welcome back, everybody, to 32 on 32 here on Chase's Sports News, where we preview every NFL team season with a team reporter. Today, we preview the New England Patriots' upcoming season with a very special guest, the sports anchor for 7 News Boston, Maury Hirschgord. Maury, welcome back on. Appreciate it.
Chase, great to be on. Thanks for having me on. NFL season's back. It's always a good time up here in New England.
Absolutely, and at the time of this recording, it is 14-7 Dallas, and I know you grew up an Eagles fan, so I am so sorry to hear that, but don't worry, I feel like we'll probably get back in that game, but we're here to talk some New England Patriots football, because we were talking about it before, the expectation from these fans, there is a lot of hype. Now, we're going to break down that hype, how we got here, how they were a 4-win team last year, and how that's all of a sudden translated to postseason aspirations this coming year. Overall, though, what has stood out to you from Pat's training camp and their preseason action as they prepared for their first NFL game, which is this Sunday?
Well, what stood out is the veterans that aren't back from the previous regimes, be it Bill Belichick or Gerard Mayo. They had 6 captains last year, Chase. None of those guys are back on the team this year. It's a brand new everything. The slate is wiped clean. They have a new head coach who knows what winning football is like, who knows what a number 1 seed looks like. He's previously NFL Coach of the Year. Like, this is a whole different structure than what Gerard Mayo was going into just a year ago. They bring back Josh McDaniels for third tour of duty, one of the most accomplished offensive coordinators, certainly in team history, if not the NFL at large. Highly regarded as a top 5, top 10 play caller in the league. And then you look at some of the talent that they brought in as well, be it free agency, be it the draft. Certainly more talent than last year. I don't know, though, if you can go from 4 wins to that 10-11 mark where you'd certainly get into the playoffs.
That's obviously going to have to be the conversation, but it kind of shocked me when the Pats let go of Gerard Mayo, because I know it was a situation, there was like the clause in the contract essentially saying like he would be the guy to succeed Belichick, but again, it's a 4-win year, and the expectation wasn't to play well. It was like, look, try things out, see what you have out of Drake May. The core wasn't great, so they weren't expecting a postseason, and then you let go of Mayo. Was it just because of the fact that they didn't want to pass up on Vrabel being available, or like, what was the reasoning for firing a guy after 1 year? You can't really tell if he's going to be a good coach at the pro level or not.
Yeah, you had to really look at the on-field progression. Things weren't going according to plan. They certainly had a few flashes, especially there week 1 when they upset the Bengals and then came home and had a chance to go 2-0 against the Seahawks. Started out well, but a lot of stuff off the field, not holding players accountable, things that Gerard Mayo said pregame or would say going into a game against another team, and then totally changing his tune, his tenor. He'd have to walk back a lot of things he said on Monday at the day after a game. So it wasn't just the on-field product. Behind the scenes, I don't know if the Patriots, were that buttoned up. Even though they had a heady IQ former player in a head coach in Gerard Mayo, wasn't good, behind the scenes, on the field, especially what we saw. And Robert Kraft pulled pulled him out of there and gets Mike Vrabel in, another one of his former players.
Yeah, a lot of people had a feeling that eventually once Belichick retired, a lot of people just thought, particularly once Vrabel left Tennessee or was let go from Tennessee, that he would eventually find his way to New England. It felt like just a match made in heaven once Belichick left. A former Patriot, a commodity in this field. One of the best coaches in the National Football League. And you want to talk about elevating, minimal talent. That's what he did in Tennessee. He took Ryan Tannehill to division titles, number 1 seeds, AFC Championship games with a nearly upset Kansas City. So that's the type of guy he is, and he's going to do some great things here. I do want to bring up this point though with Mayo is, again, it was 1 year. I understand all the drama that could have happened. Do you think New England ever really wanted him, or did it just feel like the right way to transition from Belichick, and then they just kind of wanted to botch that whole era entirely?
Well, according to Robert Kraft, he sought out Mayo years prior and made up in his mind that he was going to be the successor to Bill Belichick on that trip to Israel. Back, I believe it was 2019, if I'm remembering correctly. I have a 4-month-old now at home, so this thing called baby brain is definitely legitimate. So there are some things that sneak out of here every once in a while. But yeah, he had handpicked Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo coached for a number of years under Bill Belichick, some good teams. Yes, they were declining, but he felt like Gerard Mayo could get them back on track. And he couldn't. As simple as that.
Yeah, and now you got Mike Vrabel here under center, not under center, but on the sidelines, kind of commanding this offense and defense of the team in general here in New England. But I want to talk about what they did in the offseason. They had a lot of money to spend. They spent it, particularly on the defensive side in the front seven. Then you had Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver. Now many view them as postseason contenders. Now many do, as we were talking about, earlier in the episode. What do you think encouraged such a drastic, I guess you could say, uptick in spending from a team that was a 4-win team last year that seemed to be in a rebuilding direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think they knew that they had to get a lot better. Robert Kraft says it all the time. It's true in the NFL. The only way you're going to get good and you're going to stay good at the top of the league is through drafting. You can't spend all your money on free agents and expect them to just all click and gel and find all the right pieces together and
Right.
have a cohesive unit. But they had to get better off defensively. They had to bring in some of Vrabel's guys. They brought a few of those guys in, like a Harold Landry, like a Robert Spillane, who he had experience with in Tennessee. They paid Milton Williams $100 million to take him from the Philadelphia Eagles. They have a couple other good defensive pieces in Christian Gonzalez, who's a young up and coming cornerback, viewed as one of the stars of tomorrow. As a defensive back, they have a guy like Christian Barmore. I mean, they have some names now on the defensive side of the ball when you look at the free agency spending and some of the names they had in house. But they also needed to get better through the draft. And so far, the early returns are that they got some talent. We'll see starting on Sunday if they did. But the reason for the uptick is because Mike Vrabel wasn't coming into a franchise that wasn't going to spend money and you look at the cupboard and the cupboard's bare because Bill Belichick and Gerard Mayo hadn't drafted well over the last 4 to 5 years. There's a reason why you don't have guys in their fourth and fifth year on their rookie deal or maybe on that second contract that's were good enough to hang around here. So, when you kind of add all that together, I'm sure Mike Vrabel, made a few comments there in his interview, like, "Hey, we got to spend money. We got to get my guys in to draft the right players. It's going to be a 2-3 year process. This thing's not just going to happen overnight. Where we turn this club around back to the way that I played, and the era that I played at. Speaking as Mike Vrabel. So we'll see what happens. But certainly more talent, certainly more excitement up here in New England, and hopefully it's somewhat of a 500 season. If they're playing meaningful games into December, I think it's certainly a success for the team in 2025.
And I think a lot of that meaning has sprung from the development, or I guess possible development, from Drake May, the former UNC product at quarterback. And, clearly has a lot of talent. You saw that last season. And even when he didn't have a lot around him, a lackluster offensive line, a receiving core that is not exactly an elite one in the National Football League, I guess is the nice way to say it. He still had some relative success. And so now you go into this year, and a lot of people think that Drake May can maybe take that jump. What do you expect from him in year two?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very hard. And I've said this a lot on some other places, but the bye week is so late in the year that I think it's going to take time for Drake May and Josh McDaniels to really find that cohesion. I think an early bye week this year would have been really helpful. You play 4, 5, 6 games. You have a chance to press pause. You get a 2-week break from games. You can look back at the first month plus of the season, and then you can chart a plan forward. The fact that the bye week comes at week 14, I think hurts McDaniels and hurts May. I think May's going to make a natural progression. He's got a bona fide number one target in Stephon Diggs. Knock on wood, hopefully he's back and back to what he looked like at the beginning of last year before he got injured, certainly during his time as a Viking and as a Buffalo Bill. He's got a good running back room. Travion Henderson, the second round pick out of Ohio State, certainly gives them a boost, a pass catching back, a guy who can block out of the backfield on passing situations. The offensive line, though, is going to be a major question mark again. I mean, they're going to start 2 rookies on the left side of their offensive line, which is very rare in the NFL, let alone one. And both of those guys are in charge of protecting Drake May's blind side. So first and foremost, Drake May needs to do what he can do, and that's protect the football. He needs to make sure he controls what he can control. If they can stay ahead of the sticks, if he can limit taking sacks and he can limit turning the ball over, all things that Mike Vrabel wants his team to be able to do, I think then that will give them the opportunity to compete. But before you win, you have to keep from losing. That is the first thing that I'm going to assess from Drake May the first couple weeks of the year. If he can keep from losing, he'll give his team an opportunity to win. Before he can go out and win games with his arm and with his legs, he's got to play within Josh McDaniel's system. If he can do that early, I think there's a bright future for the Patriots, not only here in 2025, but going forward. Because as you know, young quarterbacks in the NFL, by year 3, by year 4, they're knocking on that second contract. You
Yeah.
got to know about your quarterback after year 2. It's a big year for Drake May and the Patriots.
And I'm excited to see what he can do. And, you mentioned just not losing games, right? You got to make sure you can at least stay in games before you try to win them. It's kind of like the Anthony Richardson predicament. It's like he can probably win a game as good as any talent that's come out of the draft. He can lose a game worse than any quarterback that came out of that draft as well. So it's kind of that predicament, and that's why the Colts have, I think, officially moved on from him. They started Daniel Jones. That's a pretty bad signal. So yeah, you got to make sure that Drake May is going to be consistent. He's not going to make the bad plays and the turnover-worthy plays and the negative plays that are going to cost this team some games, and instead at least show that he could be methodical and lead this team properly down the field and conduct a great offense. I think part of that this year will be Travion Henderson. I just touch on him, and then also I want you to touch on the receiving core a little bit, because outside of Diggs, there isn't much there. Overall, you look at the running backs, the receivers, the tight ends. Is there enough there that can help this offense flourish if May takes a year 2 step?
Yeah, I think the passing attack will be formidable. I think Josh McDaniels has a great understanding of how to call plays, how to sequence plays. He'll be able to hopefully scheme around, an inexperienced young offensive line in front of a guy who's making his first ever week 1 start in the NFL. Travion Henderson, as you mentioned, like I said, second round pick out of Ohio State, national champion. Explosive as hell. First touch in an NFL game preseason, he returns the ball 100 yards for a kickoff return there against Washington. Right. Everybody knew about him at that point, right? He was kind of this under the radar. Hey, if you played fantasy football, you live in New England, you knew he was going to be a major part of this Patriots offense from day one. Now the secret's out. Travion Henderson has a much higher bar to reach because everybody saw that play. They saw the touchdown the following week in Minnesota. He's going to give the Patriots a dimension that they haven't had since the likes of a James White, since the likes of other pass catching backs out of the backfield that have made a Josh McDaniels offense so good. As far as the wide receiver room, it starts and ends with Stephon Diggs, in my opinion. If he's really good, that opens things up for guys like Matt Collins and Pop Douglas, right, the rookie and Kyle Williams. They have some talent behind Diggs. If Diggs isn't himself, if he's not out there, if he's injured, if he's hampered by injury at all and is only 50%, 60% of himself, then you don't have to double Stephon Diggs. You don't have to game plan to stop him. Now he's another guy, and that doesn't help out anybody else in the receiver room. And then you look at the tight ends. Hunter Henry's been an under the radar, underappreciated tight end the last few years here in New England. I was just doing some game prep here earlier before we hopped on, and this is a guy who, with another solid season, is going to be a top 3 tight end in Patriots history. When you look at it in terms of receptions, in terms of receiving yards, and in terms of receiving touchdowns. So this is a guy who could have 8 to 10 touchdowns at the end of the year. Going to be a security blanket for Drake May on third downs. Going to be a security blanket for Drake May in the red zone. So Drake May has some weapons. I think if the stars align, this Patriots offense has a chance. I don't know if we're going to see, anything close to the finished product week 1, week 2, week 3. But by the middle of the season, the schedule softens up. I think that's when this Patriots offense and the passing attack in particular can take off.
I'm excited for some of the skill position assets on this roster. Travion Henderson is my pick. Excuse me, for offensive rookie of the year. I just made my official predictions today. I think he's fascinating, such a talent, and a guy you should have definitely secured in fantasy for fantasy football players if they didn't. And then you mentioned Hunter Henry, a tight end, one of the league's most underrated. I do a a tight end ranking every year. A top 10, I had him, I think, 11 or 12, or I think somewhere in my honorable mentions. And I'm reading it right now. The list of tight ends who have played at least 10 games recorded at least 400 receiving yards in every season since 2019. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and Hunter Henry. So the consistency, the reliability, for sure big. Real quick before we wrap things up and kind of a quick prediction, I want to talk about the defense for a minute because, it's much more fun to talk about the offense, but, they invested a lot of their capital on the defensive side of the ball, and they were below average in that area last year. So you talk about Mike Vrabel, now at head coach, and you talk about some of those additions highlighted by Milton Williams. Is this defense going to kind of turn things around in 2025?
I would have said yes had Christian Gonzalez been healthy to start the season, but he had a hamstring injury crop up the end of July. Has not practiced or played since. He's had a lot of mental reps. He's been out there on the field. He's been a good teammate. He's supported his guys. He's shown up, but you look at this week, the first official practice week leading up to a game. Didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday. I'd be shocked if he played on Sunday against the Raiders. So without him, I think this defense will be average to below average. When he's back and he's right and he's healthy, I think this is a defense that could sneakily be top 12, top 10 in the league.
Yeah.
Because they're coached by a defensive guy who knows what he's doing. They have a defensive coordinator in Terrell Williams who just came over from the Detroit Lions, and we know the success that the Lions had just a season ago when they won 15 games. So this Patriots defense has a chance to be good. They need Christian Gonzalez back. They have an easy middle part of the schedule if Gonzalez is back. By October, if he only misses, say, the first quarter of the season,
Right.
I think this defense can be formidable.
They certainly can be, and I think you mentioned Christian Gonzalez, such a talent in the defensive back room. Yeah, when he gets healthy, this team has some potential. Again, I just did my NFL official season predictions today on Thursday, as at the time of this recording, and I have an 8-9 season for the Patriots, and I think that's pretty solid. You mentioned wanting to play meaningful games into December. I have this team playing meaningful games into December. I think they're in the postseason mix. I think they just fall short. It is an easier schedule, but they will endure some hiccups along the way. It is, again, year 2 for Drake May, year 1 for Mike Vrabel. So not everything is going to click right away. 8-9, should that be something fans should expect? Is that something they should be happy with this coming year? I mean, does that sound about right?
I think it's a fair assessment, Chase. I have them at 9-8. I have them starting off slow. I don't think the schedule's as easy as people make it out to be early on. I think they kind of stumble out the gates, and then they go on a run the middle part of the season like they did Mac Jones's rookie year. They started 1-3, ripped off 7 or 8 straight, and then at the beginning part of December of that season, they were like flirting for the 1 or the 2 seed, and then they finished really poorly. I think this team starts off slow. They get hot middle part of the schedule. End of the schedule's tough. Bills, Ravens, they've got another tough game in there as well. So I think this team ends 9-8. I think they're 7-8, 8-7 heading into the last couple weeks of the season, and we'll see. But if they are, on the in the hunt column on the graphic, on the TV during games post Thanksgiving, I think fans should certainly appreciate that and think that that's a successful season. If they make the playoffs, they're ahead of schedule, even if they get to the playoffs and they get blown out round 1.
For years, the Patriots were the dynasty. They were the top dog. They were the team to be hunted against in the National Football League. And now, they go through some hiccups. No more Tom Brady, no more Bill Belichick. It's a new area. It's a new era, of New England Patriots football. And it's possible that it could be another great one for the New England Pats. Maury Hirsch-Gordon, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're soon going to be on air with 7 News Boston, so we appreciate you taking these past 18, 19 minutes to talk some Pats football. We appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, Chase. Anytime. Good luck, and keep doing a great job.
Thank you so much. We're going to wrap this one up here alongside the sports anchor at 7 News Boston, Maury Hirsch-Gordon. I'm your host, Chase Coburn, saying so long. Stay tuned for our final 32 on 32 previews right here on Chase's Sports News. Happy football, everybody. Signing off. I'm your host, Chase Coburn.